Disgusting.
Atrocious.
Frustrating.
Flabbergasting.
Sickening.
Revolting.
Oh. Throw up inducing.
Whatever the opposite of tantalizing is.
Upsetting.
Heart-wrenching.
Hurtful.
Gut-wrenching.
Somewhat surprising.
Not at all surprising.
This is Why Am I a Mets Fan? A podcast hosted by Samantha Croston and Ashley Wenskoski.
Welcome into Why Am I a Mets Fan, everyone? Episode 3. We just wanted to list off some of the ways that this week has made us feel. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. This is my co-host, Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston. This is a podcast that explores the facts, the fascination, and the farm behind the New York Mets. If you want to find us on social media, you can pretty much everywhere at WhyMetsPod. You can also watch our episodes on YouTube there at WhyMetsPod. So if you are watching from YouTube, hello, and what is up from the Sky Cam? If you're listening, thanks so much for listening. This is a specialty Saturday night episode, in part because Ashley's leaving, but also in part because we just felt like it was the perfect time.
I would like to put a disclaimer to everyone listening to this episode right off the bat. If you are not a disgruntled New York Mets fan and you're not angry, you're probably not going to like it very much. I have a lot to say. Not a lot of it's positive. The Mets are broken, and so am I.
And so am I. And so am I. Yes, I understand that. So just so people understand where we're at right now, again, it's Saturday evening. It's around 7 o'clock right now. Mm-hmm. The Mets are 21-30. They're 2-8 out of their last 10. They're 4th place in the NL East, and they are 15 and a half games back from first place. They've lost 4 series in a row. More importantly, they have not won since we last spoke. We normally record every Sunday. They've played 5 times. They've lost 5 times. I feel like you need to go off.
I feel like when you told me that they have not won since we last spoke, like, that's jarring. I didn't realize it had been nearly a full week since we've, had a win last Sunday. Which, by the way, even when they do win these days, it doesn't feel good because they're just salvaging the 3rd game of the series. They've already lost the series, so it's like, let's just get one back. So we haven't felt good in a long time.
That's exactly what that was, too, by the way.
Yes.
That's what that Sunday was a win against the Marlins. And quite honestly, we didn't even, it sort of just still had that womp, womp, womp feeling.
Yeah.
But this week, even more so.
I mean, the Mets find a new way to lose every single day. It is truly, they are finding ways to lose games. It's not even your typical, right, everything goes wrong. I mean, Luis Severino had a great start today. Today's Saturday. Luis Severino, great start on Saturday. Christian Scott, more than serviceable start on Sunday. They find a way to lose both games. They find ways to lose ball games. And
Are you nervous to leave the sports office at this time?
Why?
When you watch the Mets game, I feel like every time you leave, something messed up happens.
Yes, I literally went upstairs on Friday night for 30 seconds. I had to stop the recording on the Syracuse women's lacrosse game, which is my real job. And I went upstairs, stopped the recording. It's 6-3. Mad spaces are loaded. What's his name? Reed Garrett is in. And I come back down the hallway and I hear Gary Cohen saying 7-6 Giants. I mean, you just can't. It's like a comedy series.
But it's not funny.
But it's not funny. You know what's coming. But you're too afraid to really. You're like, is this really happening again? When does it stop?
Because for me, it's honestly giving more like horror movie. And by the way, when I say Ashley leaving the sports office, always a reminder and a disclaimer: we're in Syracuse, so we're both broadcasters at the local stations here. So Ashley is generally watching the Mets in frustration here on Saturdays and Sunday nights, sports anchoring. Yeah. And the truth of the matter is, for me, I always think another way when things are really at a bad place is when Gary Cohen starts to feel that way too.
I think when the broadcasts, when they start to sound disappointed, that is how you know. Because to be fair, they're one of the best broadcast booths in baseball. A lot of people think that.
Yep.
We for certainly think that. I
win
can't
that
talk
game every
today.
night.
Sorry for certainly. Win that game every night. And when they start to sound disheartened, that is when you know things are not good.
In a bad place. I mean, let's just work backwards. Saturday afternoon meltdown is the way that we put our bullet point in today. Edwin Diaz blows another save. It was a single, a stolen base, a single, and the Mets ultimately actually end up losing 7-2 after giving up 5 runs in the 10th. But you mentioned this, and I think this is the important part, perhaps what makes it so frustrating. Severino today, 7 innings pitched, 2 hits, 1 earned run, 3 walks, 6 strikeouts. I mean, he really had a good day.
Severino had a no-hitter going until like the 6th or 7th inning. I forget which one, okay? And they can't find a way to win that game and salvage that start. I mean, Edwin Diaz, we can get into it. We can get into the whole thing. But from my perspective, if you are Carlos Mendoza, should Edwin Diaz be coming into a 1-run game again? He came in on Friday, he struck out 2, he had a clean 7th inning, right? They decided they had to put them in some lower leverage situations to try to work him back. If I am winning 2-1 today and I am the Mets and I haven't won a game in nearly a week, for instance, I don't think I'm putting Edwin Diaz, for example. I don't think I'm putting Edwin Diaz in the game. Now, I saw Anthony DiComo say post-game on SNY, right? I don't want to crucify Carlos Mendoza because at the same time, who else you got? Like, what's your other option? You'd rather lose the game with Edwin Diaz on the mound than lose the game with Sean Reed-Foley, which was the next option.
But that's what I was going to say is like, I understand not wanting him in, but this has been the biggest question on my mind. If not Edwin Diaz, then who?
And that's the problem. Adam Ottavino, not good lately. He really doesn't have a lot of other options. But I still don't know if I agree with the Diaz thing. I mean, I don't know what you think. He had no one else. Yes, you would rather lose with Edwin Diaz than Sean Reed-Foley. But at the same time, like, Edwin Diaz just has not had it lately. And, you know, what does that do to his confidence again now?
No, I mean, I'm looking through here just to see some of the options, but you mentioned it. It's like Ottavino right now has a 6.48 ERA. It's like, woof, you know? It's hard to say who would be better. And I do think, clearly, that's not even the only issue. There's other things that need to be fixed. But even if everything else was going right now, every time that you would get to the 9th inning, I'd still feel terrible. I'd still feel really nervous and really worrisome, and my stomach would be in knots because of the way that this has all been going. I was fine with the decision, honestly, to put Diaz in today because they need to know, like, and again, this is where I almost like appreciate the fact that we've had pitchers on before, and I would love to have pitchers on again, because how long do these things last? You can't predict that.
Yeah.
He could have come in today and had a strong game, you know, and he didn't. And now it really does, you start to even question more things. I mean, you predicted this a week ago. You said the first thing that they're going to do is they're going to start putting him in the 7th or the 8th inning, you know.
Which was good on Friday.
Which was good. And so there was a little bit of confidence restored. You're not seeing as much of the big show anymore and the lights, and they're really trying to do everything they can to take the pressure off. But I still get the sense that he's still feeling that. Because in my mind, it's almost like that's pressure in and of itself too, in a way, right?
Right.
Like if you know that they're not playing the song and they're doing all those things because they want you to perform better. I can't explain it, but I could just imagine that feeling of having everybody in the crowd being home, almost maybe being a little more nerve-wracking because you know everybody's rooting for you and you don't want to hear the, you know, New York is a pretty tough place. You'll hear the moans and the groans if people are not liking the performance that you're putting on. But it's just like it just hurts. It hurts to watch. It hurts to even listen to the broadcast because to go from that, even, you know, the game ends up being tied 2-2. Like how is it getting to 7-2?
Well, we'll touch on that in a while about this team's energy, but I feel like Carlos Mendoza defended his decision post-game on putting in Diaz, and he said you can't hide him, and said it's his job to find lanes for Diaz right now. But in my mind, it's like, all right, what are those lanes, right? The 7th inning went a little bit better on Friday, like we mentioned. I think the lane you got to stick in right now is those lower pressure spots. I know there's no one else to put in, but if I have a free-falling Edwin Diaz, I just don't think a 1-run game when we haven't won in a week is that spot. And I know you'd rather throw out your all-star closer out there, but he's just not an all-star right now. I mean, Edwin Diaz has to find his stuff one way or another. We have to turn a corner, or we have to go to Syracuse, or we have to only pitch in the 6th, or something, because this is not working. It's losing them ball games. And I think the other difficult part is, as we touched on before, it's the bullpen as a whole, right? The Mets didn't have to worry about the bullpen for the beginning part of this season. The bullpen was locked down. The lineup was a mess. Not a mess, but the lineup wouldn't hit. starting rotation was a little bit of a disaster, but you always had the bullpen. Now the bullpen's hit their slump where we're looking into June, nothing's working.
I mean, yeah, all-star. He's a no-star right now.
No
like,
star.
Like he is 0 stars.
0 stars. Review
Zero
on
stars.
Yelp.
and it is interesting. Like I'm looking at some of the comments of, what we've been hearing during the broadcast, and this was just today. You're hearing this from all three of them. Boy, oh boy, it feels like the sky has been falling. And Gary Cohen says it has felt like that virtually every day for the last month. I would have to say I agree with that. I think it's a good time to bring up a couple of our tweets of the week, because that also will kind of give you the pulse of how things have been going. One of them this week, we actually decided on a little Mr. Cohen situation.
From the owner himself.
Yep.
The man of the hour.
And at first, which you put this down, I thought this was interesting. At first, he says, looking forward to our 10-game homestand starting tonight. Of course, that was ahead of the 10-game homestand. And then,
Do a little rewind sound.
like not 10 hours later, what
Or
a
fast
stretch.
forward, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a stretch. Mind-boggling. I know how disheartening this is for our fans. Thank you for caring so much. He knows it too. I
Yeah.
mean, it's to the point where this is our one other tweet of the week. I hope that it's either Ben Yole or Ben Yoel.
Yep.
He says, "Be careful out there, everyone." It's a little pic. This is just a classic. The memes, by the way, top tier. So thank you to
the
all of
memes have
Mets
been
Twitter.
so good.
They have been iconic. But you're seeing, a broken glass in a car, and it says, "Be careful out there, everyone. I had 2 Mets tickets in my car, and someone broke in and left 4 more."
I would prefer for the Mets not to be a meme, just to clarify.
Yes. But it does kind of give you some insight into the ways that people are feeling, because we've discussed this before, but my overarching feeling is that this is not a team that just, sucks top to bottom. It's really not.
No.
Like, it's a team that has a lot of good players, a lot of good moments, a lot of good innings, but not a lot of good games.
They
recently.
can't put it all together.
They
They just
just-
cannot put it all together. And I think it's tough, right, to hear. I've said this before. I'll say it again. Steve Cohen, on occasion, tweets like a guy who's loved the Mets for 50, 60 years. That he's the owner, but sometimes he tweets like a fan. And I think that is polarizing for people, because I think, at points people want him to be more of that formal ownership leader, I guess, role. But at other points, right, it's good to hear from the guy. I mean, it's good to see him on Twitter. He owns the team. It's good to see he knows what's going on, and he's got a pulse on how the fan base is feeling. So it goes both ways. And I just think that we can get into our topics here, but where I'm going to go with this is basically the team seems unenergized. To go off what you were saying of this is not a bad team top to bottom, I guess talent-wise, if that's what you want to call it. The numbers might not reflect that this year, but this team just does not feel like when they get down in a ball game, when they are coming from behind, it never feels like they're going to come back. Ever. And that is something, I heard this on the broadcast today, that Mike Piazza said in 2000 when the Mets won the World Series, or were in the World Series against the Yankees. They did not win the World Series. That team, every night when they were down, and that's a World Series caliber team, it felt like they were going to come back and they were going to tie it or they were going to win it. This Mets team never feels like they are going to come back. The minute they start losing a game, you might as well turn off the television. I mean, I don't know what the stats are behind it, but they don't feel like they're going to come back in games. They do not feel like they have that spark under them. I mean, does it even feel like they're going to win at the beginning of the day is my question to you, because lately my answer to that is no.
Well, the crazy thing is, and that's kind of what I mean. It's like this particular week of losses has been just unbearable. I mean, the amount of times that you and I have texted, or I'm seeing a little score update, under the TV, Mets up big, up by 3 or 4 runs. And then you're coming back and you're seeing that they lost. And it's like, if I'm not watching the game, then I'm thinking, I just don't even understand how this ever could have happened. And that's how I felt about the Friday night meltdown, right? The Mets lose to the Giants 8-7 to begin that homestand. Reed Garrett, we end up seeing, gave up a grand slam when they were up 6-3, and that is ultimately what got them in that place. They've lost 11 of the last 14, 21 of the last 30. Of course, Carlos Mendoza is saying they're angry, but he's also saying they're battling. Like, it's hard this early in the season to be having, then that is going to be a really long battle. You know what I mean? It's going to be an uphill battle, and it already is.
Folks, we are putting this out on it's Memorial Day. We have 4 months of baseball left. Other teams will have more, probably not the Mets. But we have 4 months of a season left, and to be battling on Memorial Day, it's like they are at a spot where, that Yogi Berra quote that Keith Hernandez uses a lot on the SNY broadcast, it sure gets late early around here. It's getting late early for the Mets. And I think that it is going to be so tough. I mean, the deadline, it's not approaching, but if you wanted to say approaching, you could say, I guess some things will be shaken up at the deadline for better or for worse. This team right now is an unwatchable product, and something's got to give.
An unwatchable product.
They are.
That's interesting. And we will, before we get into trade rumors, I also thought this was an interesting just thing that happened this week. When Francisco Lindor is going back to Cleveland, they're asking him, what's the thing that you miss the most? And he says winning. That was a tough pill to swallow, too.
It was a tough pill to swallow. I think he meant it more in like, I miss my teammates. I miss those are the guys that came up with the camaraderie. But he point blank said winning. And he hasn't done much winning in New York. They had that gasp of air in 2022. They won 101 games. You know what? He knows what it feels like in New York, which is crazy, by the way, that this team won 101 games as recently as 2022, might I add.
And the outcome of that, also kind of crazy.
Yeah, but Lindor's comments, I mean, they set Mets Twitter ablaze as they should have. And the Mets clubhouse, like those comments and everything all put together, this clubhouse is a funeral. Every postgame, SNY takes you into the locker room. You hear from everybody. Lindor, after the Friday night loss, was maybe about as downtrodden as I've seen him, answering questions at his locker room. I mean, he really was struggling to find the words. Like, sounded like the guy was going to cry, to be frank with you.
And it hurts, like, out of all of the players, when we've said, the entire season and the entire duration of us doing this podcast, that he's the light.
Yeah.
And if that light is dimmed, it's tough when you're feeling that from all the leaders, from ownership, from the managers. Like, it is a top-down situation that needs to be fixed. But I get it. I mean, it is hard because, to your point, I will say, it's like the second you see them get down, you just don't feel good about their chances to battle back.
Right.
And I feel like even in recent years, there have been teams where you did not feel that way about, and you really did feel like they would battle back. But this year's team, and especially through this stretch, we haven't felt that way. You mentioned, or go ahead.
Well, I was to wrap up this unenergized note. I feel like it's so tough, right? Because I was thinking about, like, all right, Lindor, Nimmo, Alonso, the guys who have been around, they know what this feels like. Okay, last year was not a walk in the park. They know this mojo and this. But can you imagine being a guy who the Mets signed in the offseason? Like, if you are JD Martinez or you are Luis Severino right now, you're like, what the hell is going on at this place?
I know.
This sucks. This is not fun. This is a funeral every day, and I don't know who it starts with. I don't want to crucify Carlos Mendoza. I'm not saying it starts with Carlos Mendoza, but I do think, and this is my opinion, you can tell me if you agree with me in the comments or not. Like, I saw a Terry Collins tweet about when the Mets were bad back in the Terry Collins era, and he's at the point, he's yelling, he's like, that's not what I'm looking for. I guess that's maybe not always the answer in sports, is to, start screaming and throwing things at the walls. But at the same time, I would just like to see a little more fire. Like Carlos Mendoza, even today, he gets up there and he's like, guys are growing. We're going to put it all together. Like, are you? You're not inspiring me right now.
Right.
And that is something that Terry Collins brought to the Mets. Terry Collins would get mad. He would
no
get
doubt.
frustrated, and you would know about it. And he would say in the rant I listened to, like, this is unacceptable. We have guys in Syracuse who want to play. Like, I just would like to see, and I don't know your opinion, I would love to hear everyone else's opinion, a little more fire all around, top to bottom, not just Mendoza, everyone.
I understand that. And honestly, you know what? That one is tough for me, because I will say, for me, there is sort of a line. Like, I know that was even something where people talked about with Showalter, that he just always seemed kind of stoic.
Yeah.
And I understand that. I don't mind a little fire to an extent. I wouldn't even mind a little bit of, like, energy either way. To me, it doesn't have to be yelling or negative or up in your face. I would even take a little more positivity, or even just, yelling as a form of inspiration or motivation or something to that effect. But I'm sure it's also, I feel like it must just be tough right after these losses to be feeling that way. We also don't know the kinds of things that he maybe says when the press and the media aren't there.
Right.
So I don't know if part of it, I don't need it for show. I just need it to actually be happening.
Yes.
And I'm not sure whether or not that's the case. I don't know that we will know that. But to your point, it's not just him. There are a lot of different pieces that make this work or not work. And obviously a part of that is going to be Steve Cohen. That brings us to our trade rumors. Bob Nightingale of USA Today tweeted that rival GMs remain convinced that the Mets will make Pete Alonso and JD Martinez available prior to the trade deadline. You have thoughts about this. You have thoughts about a lot of things, but you definitely have thoughts about this.
I have a lot of thoughts this week. Yeah, I have thoughts about this. I gave my thoughts on Alonso on our first episode. If you haven't listened, go back. I apparently, declined a extension offer from the Mets in the offseason, whatever, that whole ring around. We won't touch on that today. JD Martinez is an absolute goner if things continue how they're continuing, which is a shame because I met him when he was down in Syracuse. Really like the guy. I think he's a great presence
really
on
likable.
the Mets lineup. But if they are completely dead out of it in July, he has a one-way ticket out of New York. It was a nice couple months, JD. Thanks for staying. They'll get some pieces for him. My thoughts on all of this, right? Like Alonso, Martinez aside, the bigger picture. And I saw some people, sharing these types of sentiments on social media as well this week. Steve Cohen bought the Mets in the fall of 2020. They had been bad for like 4 years straight. They had not been good since 2015, 2016 when he bought the team. So he really did what any long-suffering Mets fan, who I like to point out that Steve Cohen is, would do. He tried to win immediately. He went out. God knows he has the money. The guy's a billionaire. So he went out. He bought the best free agents on the market. He bought Lindor, Verlander, Max Scherzer. He really did all he could do in the here and now. Because to be frank with you, in 2020, the Mets fans were not going to take well if somebody bought the team and said, yeah, we're going to do a rebuild. Like, I think, give us 4 or 5 years. Mets fans would have lost it. Then you're going on a decade at that point. Anyways, so he did pretty much the only viable option and hit the win now button. It didn't work. And that's what we're coming to terms with now is it did not work. This core of players, as much as we want them to work, as much as they're likable guys, as much as I like Brandon Nimmo and I like Francisco Lindor and I like Pete Alonso, they haven't won anything. As much as they've done is get to the NL Wildcard Series in 2022 and lose it to the Padres. So here they are. They find themselves 4 years into this experiment with Steve Cohen, and they have nothing to show for it. And now it's easy to go back and say, well, they should have done a classic rebuild. That's what they. But at the time, right, as I just said, Steve Cohen didn't really have a choice. The fan base was not going to take well to that, especially with a guy who is a billionaire. He has the money. So if he's like, yeah, give us 3 or 4 years, Mets fans would have hated him off the rip. So now we're left at this teetering halfway point of we didn't do the rebuild. It's too late to, go back in the past. Now we're left with what we're left with. This core isn't winning. What do? You don't tear it all down again. I guess they probably should have done a rebuild after last year is my sentiment. And after last season is when Steve Cohen, there were warning signs. He said, him and David Stearns said, really we're looking at 2025, blah, blah, blah. Like we're going to be competitive in 2024. But what did you want them to say? We're not going to be competitive in 2024? Like, of course they said that. In conclusion, I will end rant here, but I don't like when I see the Steve Cohen hate on Twitter, and this is in defense of him, because what did you want the guy to do? And here we are, and it didn't work. And now we're left to pick up the pieces of it didn't work. We have to find a new avenue, and we don't know what the avenue is.
And that is one of the crazy things about it, is like Steve Cohen is, as you mentioned, he is a billionaire.
A billionaire,
like
with a B.
With a B.
With a B.
Like the amount of funds that is, the amount of money that is. One night I got into an absolute hole just looking at all of the different houses that he has just across the country. And it really, I have to say, $1 billion or more goes a long way.
Impressive real estate catalog.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it was also a really good lesson and reminder that money does not equate to winning.
Yeah.
Like money just can't buy you that. It can't. I totally agree. I think at the time he did what he thought was the right thing. And honestly, I think at that time, everybody on Mets Twitter really, really liked that decision.
Absolutely.
You really felt, and you got the idea from the fan base that everybody thought this is a great idea. Let's just see if we can go on a little run here with the stars that we're bringing in. And you just see that happen from time to time. It happened with the Nets too when they try to bring in the big three. Sometimes there's just a combination that you really think is going to work and it doesn't. And the question is, what do we do now? Because the teetering thing is just not going to work for anyone. It's like you do need to commit one way or the other. So at the point that we're at right now, it's like it's so tough because what you said is so true. You want this group to work. It's a very likable group, and it's a group where you feel like, or at least I have felt like in the past, like these are a lot of the right pieces. These are guys who I would want to root for.
And a group that's largely homegrown.
Yep. But it's not working. So I do think that something needs to change, and I would be really comfortable with the idea of kind of the direction that you've seen things going in, but that rebuild. I'm just ready and prepared to try for that. You know, I don't know exactly what else there is to hold on to. I'd like to see how things go for the next, month and a half, let's say. But this is like a slump, not like no other, but this is a slump that feels different to even, the 0-5 start and all that. It's like everything they had overcome, but this feels like it's just not, they just don't even feel really all that competitive anymore.
Yeah. They're not in these games. They're not in this week, this month, this season. I agree with you. I think I would like to see an expedited rebuild, which I think was the plan, right? When they said look towards 2025. The farm is not in terrible shape right now. It's not in a bad spot. I don't really know exactly where their farm rankings are, but I mean, there are some guys, there are definitely some pieces working their way up through the system. So I would like to keep building the young pieces. I think where it really starts is the rotation and this lineup. I mean, look, like I said it, now I'm just getting repetitive, but I like Brandon Nimmo. I like Pete Alonso. I like Jack McNeil. I like Francisco Lindor. I like the guys, but they haven't won anything. And so something's got to give there.
They haven't won anything, and it's even that. It's a matter of when they do get down, or let's just say even the game is tied, I don't really feel anymore like I have the confidence in anyone who is the guy, who and you can feel assured when they step up to the plate that something's going to happen, or they're going to be the spark to get some more guys on bases and start a little run. There's really not that guy anymore. I even felt like some of the time last year, I actually felt like McNeil could be that guy at times who could just get you a single. I did feel a little bit more confident in Nimmo.
Alonso for sure.
Sure, absolutely, Alonso. But I just don't have that anymore. I don't have that confidence anymore. Final thoughts on the Mets, on what you've seen, because by the way, we'll get to it, but Syracuse Mets, really good team.
We can put a smile on our face when we talk about the Syracuse Mets.
Truthfully.
Throwing that frown upside down.
Honestly.
No, I mean, my final thoughts on the Mets is just, it is tough right now. I don't know how it gets better in the short term. I can see how it gets better in the long term after, the deadline and whatever happens there. But in the next 2 months before that little deadline, I mean, we have some baseball to play. They're losing to bad teams. The Giants are like a 500 team. They lost a series to Miami. The Dodgers are coming to town next week, so that's not going to get any easier. They've got to figure out a way, one way or another, to turn the ship around. And if the ship can't be turned around, at least try to turn around the mantra and the vibe and the energy of the group, because right now it is just bad. And we touched on this, but a large part of that recently is the bullpen problems. Brooks Raley out for the year. Reed Garrett, gave up the grand slam on Friday. So it's one thing or another. If they hit, they don't pitch. If they pitch, the bullpen doesn't pitch.
That really is it. It's the puzzle, and it's a matter of putting all the pieces together, and that's the last thing I'll say. Then we can move to the Syracuse Mets too. I think an interesting stat of this week was the fact that the Mets are the 5th team in Major League history to hit at least 3 home runs in consecutive games and lose all 3. So again, it's not to say that they are never hitting or never pitching great. Both of those statements would be a lie. It's just a matter of them being able to put it together, and that's something that we haven't seen happen in quite some time. The games that they're losing, you're seeing the result of that. You're seeing pieces that are not built into the full puzzle. So that's just what we're going to be hoping for in the next week. We're still Mets fans. We'll always be Mets fans, and that's why we'll be here again next week. But damn, I can see why fans are feeling disappointed.
They're finding ways to lose, not finding ways to win.
That's exactly it. Period. You said it best. Syracuse Mets, this is our feel-good story of the freaking week. This team is on a roll.
Put a smile on your
face.
Right?
29-19, 3 games back in the division to Scranton. Mike Vassell gave up 2 earned runs. That was our first guest on the podcast, so go check that out in his last start. But Acuna is also heating up. I mean, they have chemistry, they have energy, and they're winning night after night.
Yeah, this is a team that has fun together. Again,
Fun.
we heard Mike Vassell say that in our interview, that they've always got music on in the locker room. This is a team that hangs out on the weekends, and that's always a good sign as far as sports teams go. Yeah, Acuna's heating up. I mean, Mike Brosseau, he's hitting well. And yeah, they're really doing well. I believe they're winning today too, as we're recording this on Saturday night. I saw that they were up 9-5 against Scranton. So this is a team that could give us not only some pieces up in New York later this summer and into this fall, but also could give us a fun summer in Syracuse. I mean, there's a chance that they're competing, for this division, or they're in the playoffs in some sense. So I think that they're going to be exciting to watch here in Syracuse, and for Mets fans surrounding into later in the summer.
Hey, also, we always give you guys, a player to watch or someone who you should keep your eyes on. This week, that's Blade Tidwell.
What a
called
name.
up to. I mean,
I love that name.
like A Star Is Born.
Blade? Like,
Hello.
come on. For a pitcher? Oh,
Even Tidwell.
love it.
It really just rolls off the tongue quite nicely. He was called up to Syracuse this week from Binghamton. Line in his debut, 5.2 innings pitched, 3 hits, 2 runs, 4 walks, and 3 strikeouts. He had 91 pitches total. Listen, this is a guy who we're hoping to get on as a guest. I hope that we get to hear from him in the future. But my biggest takeaway, quite honestly, when we had on Vassell, is when we were talking to him, and he said that there are obviously, for good reason, a lot of AAA teams where there are guys who are maybe just rehabbing, or guys who are thinking about their next step, and they're always looking ahead. He's like, on this Syracuse team, all of the guys really stay present. As much as they can, they really want to be here in Syracuse, playing on this team, playing with each other. And that's pretty rare. The chances are you don't get that in very many places at the AAA level.
Absolutely. And in a broader scope, I think it's great to hear that, Tidwell, another pitching option for the Mets down the stretch. I don't know if the guy goes from AA to the majors this year. We'll see. But the back of that New York Mets rotation is such a, I hesitate to say disaster, but it's such a, musical chairs game, right? Adrian Hauser, we don't know. Tyler McGill, we don't know. David Peterson's coming back this week. The 4-5 spots in that rotation are musical chairs. So for these guys in Syracuse, Mike Vassell, Tidwell, if he pitches well, there's a couple others in that rotation right now. There is an option that they could get called up to Queens in August, September, maybe July, the way things are going. So the pitching in Syracuse has been great, and we will be excited to see them, if that translates to New York later in the summer. I don't know. We'll see.
I know that's right. Listen, always keep in mind, we will have those up-and-coming names for you. We plan to have on even more guests from the Syracuse Mets, players, coaches, even broadcasters. We have a lot of different things in the work, and we're here with you through the summer and through the season, rain or shine, win or lose. So thank you for sticking with us through it, and we will see you back here next week, Sunday.
And tell us your thoughts. And we're all frustrated, we're all upset, but give us your thoughts on this Mets team right now.
Absolutely. We want to hear everything that you think is going wrong, any of the things you think are going right, and what you think should happen for the future of this year's team. That's Ashley Wenskoski. I'm Samantha Croston. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.